Well, last week I introduced you to my next project. This is the undercarriage to an 11-passenger Yellowstone Park stagecoach. I'd like to restore it. So the first process in all this is actually to disassemble all this, run the iron through the sandblaster, keep my wood in as close proximity as I can, because this is going to become my pattern for all the new wood as I put this back together. Well, as you know from watching past projects, this whole process is the beginning of some type of relationship between me and this vehicle. It just kind of happens that way. The more I work on it and I get to know the ins and outs of what it's been through, not just when it was built and how it was built, but things are going to show up of probably what has happened to it during its life. It just kind of seems to happen that way. So it's taken me back, and I'm kind of shifting gears in my head back to Yellowstone coaches and some of that history. Well, I've been reading a little bit about the history of the Monida stage line, and it does change its name a couple times. I've read Monida stage line, Monida Western stage line, and then into Yellowstone Western. Well, I guess according to the Yellowstone Park history site, they began in 1898 and they operated as Monida Yellowstone until 1913. And then they changed, for whatever reason, into Yellowstone Western from 1914 or 13 or 14 into 16. Well, when 1917 came around, the horse-drawn carriage era in Yellowstone Park ended, and the white touring buses, the automotive type touring, came in 1917. So these then became obsolete. And story has it that at one time that the Yellowstone Park tried to disperse and offer for sale many different Yellowstone coaches, trying to disperse them. And there were so many that they couldn't sell them all. And story that I've heard over and over again is that at one time when they had reached the point to where nobody was interested, they piled up somewhere close to 400 of these vehicles and burned them and buried them. That's what makes antiques antiques. And that's why these that are remaining begin to be kind of a sought-after collectible vehicle. So, to bring you kind of along the line a little bit, I mentioned that, they're named the Red Line. It's kind of a nickname. But they started in Monida, which was the railroad stop. And Monida is called Monida because it is right on the border of Montana and Idaho. So Monida is half Montana and half Idaho, Monida. And so that's where they would pick up the passengers off of the railroad. And it was 70 miles into what is now West Yellowstone. And in the middle of that, in the Centennial Valley, Red Rock Bluff, I think is what it's called, there was a stage stop there, about 35 miles across, and they would stop, switch out horses, give the passengers a break, and go the rest of the way, all within one day. So it was a push, and they just opened them up, and they moved right along. And that's part of why these are called stage coaches. They would run their route in different stages, and if it was too far apart between town to town, they would have a stage stop to give some relief to the customers, and also to change out their teams for a fresh team to where they could make the next route. So hence these were called stage coaches. They were coaching in different stages. So that is the route that they took. They came in through from Oneida to West Yellowstone, then they went south into the Old Faithful, came up to Lake Village, Mammoth, and out at what was they named as Cinnabar, which would have been north of what we call Gardner today. So that was the route, and this, according to this map, it shows that they took 6 days to complete that route. 1 day was traveling from the railhead to the park, and then 5 days in the park. And then they would travel north, most likely to catch the railroad out of Livingston and head home wherever home was. So this particular coach has a number on it, 26957 on the undercarriage. The body has a different number on it. I think it is 2282 if I remember. But they're two different numbers, which is really common in that era because they would either have a wreck or they would have wheel problems or whatever, and oftentimes they would take and intermix bodies to undercarriage just to keep them going. So it's really nice to find a coach that is all same number, body and undercarriage, but it doesn't always happen that way, and it looks like possibly this is one of those coaches that somewhere got shifted. Now I have the copy of the records of Isabel Haynes when they bought a number of these coaches, so it's kind of helpful to tell generally when they were purchased, when they were built. I don't know that I can nail it down specifically because not all the vehicles are noted in those records, but it gives us a ballpark of about where it is. So it looks like this undercarriage is actually newer because it's 26,000 number where the body is a 20,000 number. So the body was probably off an earlier coach, and then something happened, who knows what, put on a body for a, maybe they just brought in an undercarriage. We don't know that picture. So that's part of getting to know this, and maybe some of that will surface, I don't know. But this is an 11-passenger coach. It will have 3 seats in the back, and there are some old black and white pictures, pretty good quality of some 11-passenger coaches. This other coach that I want to build and use these irons to pattern off of is an 8-passenger. Well, the rear seats through the main body of this coach accommodate 3 passengers each, and then the driver and 1 more passenger on top would allow 2 more. So an 11-passenger is 3, 6, 9, and then 2 for 11 up on top, and the 8 passengers is 3, 6, and then 2 up on top for the 8-passenger. And in these records, it shows that they also purchased some 17-passenger ones. Those were probably the hardtop style, perhaps with a tally-ho in the back. So Frank Haynes was a notable photographer, and he also got into the staging business. And I have a book that he produced that was first printed in 1912. And it was continued to be printed up until 1928, and that's the version of his book that I have, is the 1928 version. And in that book, since it is 1928, it is past the horse-drawn era to the era where motorized vehicles were bringing tourists into the park. At this time, it doesn't look like the park was open to private travel like it is today. You still had to hire tours, but it was all done by vehicles, most commonly the white vehicle. So in the center of his book, there is a picture that he has included, and it contrasts these 2 eras. On the top of the picture, it shows all the stagecoaches of the horse-drawn era coming in through a gate, and the lower picture shows all the automotive vehicles bringing the tourists in. Well, this is a start. Kind of created a mess, huh? I don't try to save every bolt. As you can see, they get to be so rusted in some of this wood that I just choose to cut them off. I'm going to put all new bolts in anyway. I'll kind of clean up this mess, and then I've got some sandblasting time ahead of me. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.